A Queen's Love by Sammy Jack. Read by Pixar TNT. Chapter 1. The hooves of the changelings must join as one, and together the swarm will flourish. Chrysalis smiled as she finished her song, closing the eyes of the changeling who lay on the ground. He was no longer in pain, and there was no saving him, but she did the one thing that she could think of, put his mind at ease. Getting up, she felt something form in her stomach, getting sickened at the sight before her. So she turned to walk through the trees. Her heart was wrenched with guilt as she walked through the wooded encampment. Queen Chrysalis, after having been halfway across Sequestria, began to gather all of her people that she could find. Many were lucky and had time to recuperate their flight. Others were not so lucky and had been thrown vigorously against the ground or other objects. In but an hour, the queen had gathered little more than 50 of her subjects, nothing compared to the thousands she had this morning. But it was all she could do. Over 20 of the changelings were injured and lying down, the able ones using their green adhesive to form tent-like structures between the few trees that had surrounded them. For the injured ones, they set up camp here, and after gathering enough changelings, Chrysalis had instructed 15 at the well to search for any more of their comrades. Even if it was a hopeless cause, it was the queen's utmost priority to preserve the safety of her people. Her footsteps were slow and quiet as she passed the tents. She saw the remaining changelings moving back and forth between injured, applying what little first aid they had available. Some were lucky to just have a broken rib or a bad headache. Others weren't so lucky and already had three had passed before the queen's eyes. She came across a small green tent where there was a lone changeling curled up on a pile of leaves, bleeding rather profusely. He whimpered a little in pain, but he knew that showing pain was showing weakness. His eyes were clenched shut until he noticed a presence beside him. Opening his eyes, he saw his beautiful black queen kneeling on the grass beside him. My queen, he rasped. Forgive me for allowing you to see me in such a state. The changeling applied a bit more pressure to his abdomen. Shaking her head, she returned his apology with a smile. No, Grub, it's quite all right. You've more than earned the right to show a bit of weakness before me. She placed a hole-ridden hoof upon his shoulder. You were a great leader in Canterlot. While I was unable to contact the swarm, you kept the people together. I should be the one injured like this, not watching my people suffer. Her head drooped lower, remembering how her plan had fallen apart. I let my overconfidence get the better of... Please, Lady Chrysalis, Grub interrupted, his large green eyes staring into hers. He didn't want his queen to feel responsible for what had happened. He was in charge of the swarm's assault force, so it was his responsibility for what had happened to his men. Chrysalis was taken aback by his outburst, but not offended. She merely smiled again like a mother to her sick child. You're right, nobody could have predicted that. She winced as Grub coughed, suddenly spitting out a blotch of green blood. It seems that I won't be making it after all, will I? The changeling laughed a bit as he noticed the green puddle pooling near his stomach. Well, at least I will make it to the great hive with the rest of my past brethren. Yes, the great hive. I was hoping not to see you leave so soon. You've been my second in command for so long now. It would have been nice to have you by my side after the capture of Canterlot. She stroked his cheek gently, causing him to noticeably relax. She respected the captain of the assault force. He was the smallest of the unit when he was still new, but had proven to be one of the best the swarm had ever seen. Besides the royalty themselves, years ago Chrysalis appointed him to her second in command when it came to keeping the swarm together, and the two had come to know each other rather well. He lowered his eyes a bit, thinking of how great a story it would have been to tell the day the famine of the changelings ended, but it was far from happening now. Grub turned his eyes back to the queen. Lady Chrysalis, it wouldn't be rude of me to say something about your grand scheme, would it? She laughed a bit at the question. Oh, my dear Grub, what is it? In all honesty, I don't believe we needed any love from the ponies. Confused, she squinted at her subject. What do you mean? It was obvious, correct? Our people were starving, barely getting by. I needed to do something. It was his turn to smile. We were starving, yes. The reason we always survived, got by, was from your love of the people, Lady Chrysalis. He nodded with his last statement, showing that he himself relished in that love she gave. Surprised by this, the changeling queen's mouth opened a tad. It was true. She always respected and loved her people, and they had loved her, but it was only enough to get by. The changeling people needed another source of love in order to grow. Her mouth closed, turning into a smile again, this time with tears forming in her eyes. Oh, Rob, you always know what to say to your queen. Grub winced again, feeling his body starting to go slowly numb. He placed his own blood-stained hoof on his queen's and leaned his face against it. Chrysalis knew what was coming, but didn't have any words for her soldier. She could only do one thing. Nature, nature, hide at home, coating all in our sweet green varnish, to gather all the love that is shown, and together the swarm will flourish. Chrysalis heard hoofs outside, and soon 3 changelings walked in. They noticed their deceased captain, gasping a bit. One shook himself together and turned to his queen. My lady, we've returned, and we have more survivors. Most are injured, but none are serious. Very well. She stood up, taking a moment to look at the dried blood on her hoof. The changeling queen walked out of the tent slowly, following the scouts to a group of 20 or so more changelings. They, although injured, attempted to bow to their queen, only to receive an individual hoof rested on their shoulders. As she patted each changeling's shoulder, Chrysalis was speaking. I am so glad that you all are safe. I take responsibility for what happened to you all and your friends. But remember that mourning will not help us. We need to love each other for being together and continue the life of the swarm. Everyone of her subjects smiled a bit at her statement. They truly did admire their queen, and this was the reason why. She had always shown a high level of respect to them, as if they were all equals. They all knew that this was her love that kept the swarm alive through the famine, and that would not change now, even after her grand plan failing. Now, I know you scouts just got back, but take the able this group and go out again. I don't want to have any more pass all alone. She turned to the changelings, who had just returned. If any more of our people are to leave to the great hive, then they shall do it amongst the ones who love them. Her people nodded, and the now larger group took off, flying off in different directions. The remaining walked and limped over to the encampment tents to rest. Chrysalis lowered her head, taking deep breaths. It was hard to stay strong after seeing the changelings in such state. But this was a time when her people needed her most. Like she had said before, mourning will not help the survival of the swarm. For now she only needed to focus on keeping her subjects safe. Looking to the death sky, which had turned violet by now, Chrysalis took one last moment to remember the 4 who passed before her eyes today. She would never forget them. The end. I hope you enjoyed this fanfiction reading. Thank you for watching. Bye!